Okay, welcome back to the Are You Strong show. I have an awesome guest on the show today, and what's really exciting is I love having guests from other countries. And this young man, to me, he's very young. He's tuning in from the Toronto, Canada area. But I'm going to kind of read a little bit about him. He's the founder of the Athletic Precision Group. He has a partner there, which is it's an awesome company where they help athletes really rewire their minds, for real success after sports. Okay. He's a certified mental performance coach. Okay. He's a three-time collegiate All-American, which is really cool. He was drafted by the USL Soccer League in the first round, by the way, which is extremely impressive, by the Rochester Rhinos. He played for the Ontario Province League, right? I think I got that right. Won the league championship and was named league MVP, which is, again, very impressive. Coached at Moyne University. I think I said that right. Moyne College.
You got it.
And he coached the team to their first Final Four appearance, which, man, that is some serious leadership. He's got his master's in sports education and works with young athletes, teaching them, real life skills learned through sports to set them up for success in life. Welcome to the show, Coach Jason Sousa.
I appreciate it, and thanks for calling me a young man. I appreciate that as
Well,
well.
compared to
So,
me, you're young.
yeah, so it's I work with so many young athletes, so I'm usually the old guy in that situation. So it's
Right.
it's nice to be the younger guy, I guess. So
All right, good. Well, thank you for tuning in from another country. This is great. I love having people from all around the world hopping on here. But I have a whole slew of questions to ask you, Jay. And if you don't mind, before I start peppering you with questions, tell the audience just a little bit about yourself and the work you do.
yeah, for sure. I mean, as a former athlete, I think anyone who's played sports, you never get away from that sport, right? If that's your passion, you always still identify yourself with that sport or sports overall. And I've been working as a coach since I finished my playing career. I've been working as a coach and working with a lot of different athletes, but more recently really working with them from the standpoint of mental performance and
Mm.
mindset. And as I started to really research this particular topic, it just really was a light bulb moment for me once I really dived into mindset and how high performers really separate themselves. It's a mind game. And that was the thing that I really did not understand when I was a professional athlete. And that was the thing that really held me back. And when I really dived into it, it was just like an aha moment, like, wow, this is exactly what I needed at that time in my career. And I didn't have access to that information or a
Yeah.
mindset coach. And so I've really dedicated myself to becoming that type of coach for all of these aspiring young athletes who have those big goals for themselves, and they have all of the physical traits, but they just fall short in terms of some of the mental skills. And so teaching
Yeah.
them the mental skills just to make sure that they're a fully rounded athlete, which gives them the greatest opportunity for success, is where I've found my purpose recently. So
That's great. You said high performers, they separate themselves. What does that mean? Because some people are like, what do you mean? You go in another room? I understand what you're talking about, but can you drive that a little bit deeper? Because I think high performers want to be around high performers. And that's kind of maybe what you're talking about. And they don't want to be around guys that don't care and don't work that hard and don't want to get to the next level. So can you drive that a little bit deeper? Because that's a great way to start the show about high performers separate themselves.
yeah, there's so many athletes who have similar goals, and a lot of athletes have similar talents and similar skill sets in terms of physical traits. The ones who really separate themselves really work on those traits and those mental skills that take them beyond talent, right? And those things will be things like mindset, confidence, grit, focus, all of those traits that take you beyond just your level of talent. And that's really the great separator, because there's so
Yeah.
many talented athletes, as you know,
Oh
out
my
there,
God, yeah.
right? So many. And as I always ask the athletes that I work with, what is going to separate you when your talent meets someone else with the same talent, right? And
Mm,
it's all of those other attributes that I really zone in on with the athletes that I work on, to make sure that they have all of the character traits that's going to take them beyond just where their talent is going to take them, because talent is a ceiling, if that's what you're relying on.
Mm. Now, do you believe, as a coach, a mental coach, that people create their own ceilings?
Yeah, for sure. Many of the athletes, as I work with them, you identify some of their limiting beliefs, and you realize that they've created this, their own limitations, right?
Yeah.
Based on some of the fears that they have, or some of the limiting beliefs that they have about themselves. And it's really about breaking through some of those barriers that they've created, and those mental blocks, to ensure that they can get beyond those and really maximize on the potential that they have.
Yeah. So let me ask you about you, if you don't mind, because
Sure.
because you're sitting here telling everybody about what they should do, and it's always how do we make ourselves better? But how when you retired from sport, now I guess do you ever really retire? You just start doing something else in the sports world, right? But when you retired from your actual playing days, how did you redefine your identity to make sure that you continue to grow and develop?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. For me, I think there's two separate answers to that. Number one is to continue to be involved in the game at some capacity, and for many that might be coaching and giving back to the community and working with young athletes, and working with athletes who had that same ambition that you had at their age, right? And being able to relate to them on a personal
Mm.
level, I think that is such an important thing. And it was a way for me to give back and stay involved. And the second thing is to take all of the life lessons and the person that you become through that sports journey, and being able to channel it into other areas. And for many people, that might be business or career opportunities. But I have found that even working in the business world, athletes really excel because they've learned so many life lessons through their sports journey, that allow them to be very resilient and goal oriented, and just have all of these character traits that really separate them from some of their colleagues. And so for me, it's, who do you become in that process, and how can you take those lessons to approach a different purpose that you have in life.
You said before grit. And how do you define grit? I think so many coaches look at it differently, and how do you define it, and how do you identify it in somebody?
Great question. The way that I would identify it, and I've read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth and watched her speak on a few different occasions, and she identifies it as, two different things: having passion and perseverance towards your goals for a very long time. And I think
Mm.
those are two things that I always talk to my athletes about, right? Is, do you have the passion, and do you have the perseverance to go towards your goals? And identifying it, there are ways to identify it. And when working with an athlete through my mindset mentorship program, we go through a whole process of doing an assessment on their level of grit, and then talk about strategies to work and grow that level of grit, because grit has been identified as one of the key characteristics that lead to success. And so for athletes, that is a key trait that they need to have, is that level of grit. And so it's about intentionally working on that.
So do you see people, if I hope you don't mind me driving this a little, because this is really good, do you see people with different levels of grit? And if so, how do you get them to go to the next level?
Great question. Yeah, definitely. You definitely see athletes who come in with a different level of grit. When working with athletes, I mean, I try to do assessments on all the different mental skills that we work on, and you can see variations. So some may excel in confidence, and some may excel in focus, and some may excel in grit. But even on the level of grit, there's a whole different variety of levels that they come in, and obviously you want to work on that. I think one of the big things when we're looking at grit is, number one, really understanding why they play that sport, and go beyond the surface, right? And for some people, it's, yeah, I really enjoy it, but why do you enjoy it? Oh, because it makes me feel this. Why does that make you feel this? And then sometimes we go from, I enjoy playing the sport, to, it helps me feel completely free of some of the challenges that I have, and some of the mental stresses that I have. And it makes me feel like the greatest version of myself. And allows me to make my family proud. And so we
Mm.
go into a much deeper why than just, yeah, I enjoy hitting a baseball, or I enjoy spiking a volleyball, or I enjoy kicking a soccer ball, to, this makes me feel like the greatest version of myself. And this just, it allows me to feel like there's a greater purpose behind this. And having
Yeah.
that deep level of why gives you a reason to be resilient when obstacles come. And
Mm.
obstacles are going to come, as you know, in the world of sports, obstacles are going to come. And that's another conversation we have. It's, okay, what do you want to achieve? What's the big goal that you have for yourself? Okay. And let's talk about what kind of obstacles are going to come your way. And let's talk
Yeah.
about how we're going to deal with those situations. Okay. You're going to get a big injury, right? How are we going to deal with that? Is that time to hang them up, or are we going to have a plan around getting through that, right? And what happens when we fall short of our short-term goals, right? Are we going to adjust? Are we going to push through? Or are we going to evaluate, is this the sport for us, right? And understanding ahead of time those challenges that are going to come our way allows us to prepare and plan so that they're not a surprise, and we have a strategy to overcome them.
You got it all mapped out.
Well, I wouldn't say I have it all mapped out, but I think there's certainly ways that we can take, um, some of the ambitions of these young athletes, and turn them into an actionable plan, right?
Yeah.
And so that it's less of a dream and more of a goal. And Jeff, as you know, in the world of sports, nothing is guaranteed, right? And
Right.
when I'm working with athletes and I'm working with parents, that's the same conversation I have with them. It's nothing is guaranteed, but we can do all of the right things to increase the probability of. And that's really what
Yeah.
it's about, is let's do all the right things and give us a chance, and let's
Yeah.
understand, where's the athlete today, what do they need to look like to get to their goal, what is our timeline, and let's put a plan in place to develop those character traits.
Yeah. It's funny you say nothing's guaranteed, and which you're right. Nothing's guaranteed in the future, other than there's going to come one day where somebody else says you can't play anymore. You're not good enough. You're too old. You're too the whatever, and somebody else makes that choice for many athletes. And that's tough to deal with.
Very tough.
Because when and you were going back to, and as I'm looking down, I'm writing stuff down. Like the stuff you're saying is awesome. It's like, why do you play? How does it make you feel? Do you make your family proud? What's your purpose? Are you resilient? And what I talk about the euphoric feeling that athletes have when they're in the midst of the heat of the moment of the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't think you can explain that. You can't describe that. You can't paint it on a picture, write it on a wall. It's like, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. Yes.
And every other athlete who's competed at a high level, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But I can't
Absolutely.
I can't write it out anywhere. I can't paint a picture. I can't show you what that means. I can only
No.
tell you how I feel,
No,
right?
you're absolutely right. It's, it's hard to describe, and obviously athletes understand that feeling, but it's, the rest of the world stops and time stops, and you're just,
Yeah.
there's that, as you said, this euphoric feeling that is so
Yeah.
difficult to describe, but you're in your own world, and you're in your own
Yeah.
happy place, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful place to be
Right.
when you're there. And as you said, at some point you have to stop playing, but those feelings, those memories, you
You
hold on
never
to
lose
them.
them. Oh
No,
my
you
God.
don't,
Yeah.
and even now, as despite you saying I'm a young man, I'm certainly not a young man anymore, but I still enjoy playing and playing
Yeah.
sports. And it's just being back in that, you're competing, and you're pushing yourself, and you still enjoy that moment,
Yeah.
even if it's not competitive, you
Yeah.
still enjoy that, right?
Oh yeah. I reconnected with a couple of my teammates, you know, that I haven't talked to in a long time. And we brought back memories like they were like so far suppressed and forgotten that just because everybody else bringing them up, and it just brought you right back. It's like I feel like I'm 20 years old again and living that dream, and that euphoric like aura is just blowing out. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I heard someone say this not too long ago, but when you're, after when you're that collegiate athlete, you never feel so far away from that, right? Even though we look in the mirror, we realize we're not this 19-year-old collegiate
No,
athlete, 20 year, but it seems like it was just, just
yesterday.
yesterday, right? And you are never far away from it, and
Yeah.
and it's something you cherish for sure.
Yeah. And what's funny is my brain, as old as it's getting, still says, you can go do that.
it's funny you say that. I was training a group of high performance soccer players yesterday,
Yeah,
and I jumped in to the session, and you're as you said, you're my mind can think
yeah,
quickly, but my body can't react as quickly, and so it was a humbling
yeah.
training session for me for
Well,
sure.
it's funny you say that. My mind thinks, but my body reacts really fast and says, "Don't do that." You know?
Yes.
So how about you? When your career stopped, what helped you transition from the full-time playing career-minded athlete and the identity shifted into something else? How did you handle that?
Yeah, I think for many athletes that's a tough place to navigate through, especially when you have, this ambition from a young kid to play, high performance sports for a long period of time, and then that falls shorter than what you desired. But I think the most important thing for me was understanding who I became through that journey, right?
Yeah,
And all of those traits that I picked up. And so who I became in that journey was more important than the outcome ultimately, because it allowed me to be someone who can go after any goal really outside of sports, whether that be in business and careers and relationships. I just had a foundation from my experience of going through that journey that was just so um,
Mm,
powerful in terms of where I wanted to go. And so for me, that was the most important thing is understanding who I became through that
yeah,
journey.
I love that. Understand who you became, why you were an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think guys or girls really understand how much they truly develop as a human, as an adult when they're going through for lack of better words, what I call joint suffering, you know, all the tough parts of being an athlete, you know, and it's crazy. But did when you were growing and developing your athletic career, did you have a career path, like a clear path in mind of where you wanted to go when you had to take, and I know in soccer they call it boots, right?
Hanging up the boots.
When you take your boots off, hang your boots up, did you have a clear path there, or when you were done, you're like, what am I going to do?
A little bit of both. Not at first did I know what I wanted to do, and then shortly afterwards, I really knew that I wanted to get into coaching. And my first ambition was actually to coach at the collegiate level, just because I really love that experience and that environment of collegiate sports, and to be connected to that. Perhaps it was a way of me not wanting to let go, but ultimately, as I've discovered, is that I just really love working with athletes, and perhaps I understood that at a very young age, in terms of my playing career was done, and I had this ambition. So first, I wanted to coach at the collegiate level, and that's when I went back to Moyne and finished my master's in sports education. Had the opportunity to coach there as well. So that was my first goal, I would say. Ultimately, I came back to Canada, and so that opportunity was not available to me at that time. And so I've had a journey since that time that ultimately led me back to where I am. And it's interesting because athletics, as you know, Jeff, because both of us are still involved, it's hard to let go because we're
Oh,
so connected to it, and
yeah.
it's so much a part of our identity, and it's something that we love and we're passionate about. And ultimately led me back to where I am, which is working with athletes.
You know, you said, athletics, it's hard to let go. And I mentioned before about that euphoric, it's like a drug, you know what I mean? But it's a good one. It's a good drug, you know what I mean?
Yes,
And it
yes,
just keeps you coming back. And I think no matter how old you get, you keep looking for that place to compete,
yes, yes,
right? And sometimes it might be as simple as pickleball. you know,
yes,
when
yes.
you get older, or just like I ran the New York City Marathon in 2023,
Good for
and
you.
like I'm gonna do this before I turn 60, and I did it and I ran it with my daughter. It was one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life.
Amazing.
Um, but you're always searching for what's the next thing to keep me competitive,
Absolutely,
you know?
absolutely. And I think for a lot of the athletes that I played with, or ones that I've met through my journey as well, they've made such great entrepreneurs as well, because they've had
Yeah,
that level of drive and
right.
resilience and that competitiveness, and that want to achieve goals. And so, as I said, it's about who you become through that journey that sets you up for success in so many areas of life. But that competitiveness, it doesn't go
Yeah.
away. It
No,
doesn't go away.
no. So what advice can you give current athletes who might be seeing their athletic mortality coming to reality in their transition out of sports.
Yeah, for those athletes, understand that one, you are going to be much further ahead than many others because of the experience that you just had. You're going to have a level of resilience, and you're going to have so many life lessons that are going to set you up for success, and whatever you do. And I've seen that firsthand. I've seen how athletes have been able to excel in situations where others haven't, because they haven't had to deal with that level of disappointment and that level of challenge and that level of building grit and resilience and all the things that come in that sports journey that's going to prepare you and separate you. That is invaluable in life. Honestly, that experience is invaluable because it just makes you so much better prepared for all the obstacles that are going to come your way.
Yeah. Speaking of obstacles, thinking about mental challenges, can you go back in time and talk about some of the mental challenges you face as you were growing and developing as an athlete, either collegiately or professionally?
Yeah, certainly. My approach to that is very different now, having really dived into mindset and getting certified, and it's almost become an obsession of mine to educate myself further in this area. But at that time, I knew very little, and so we often make a lot of mistakes, mental mistakes at that, you know, for example, making the error of comparing ourselves with others, right? We're on our own journeys. No two players are alike, no two stories are alike, but oftentimes we make those comparisons, and that starts to hurt our confidence. Dwelling on mistakes and failures, which are really just
Mm,
learning opportunities. But we often make the mistake of attaching so much emotion to those moments, and sometimes we miss the lessons, right? When really there's just a little, with every, as I tell my athletes, with every mistake, every setback, every failure, there's a clue in there for you to become a better athlete. But if you attach too much emotions to it, you miss the lesson.
mm,
And understanding how to manage as a collegiate athlete, as managing that balance between school and sports, and just being proactive and being able to manage that from a level of priority and not just time
yeah.
management, right? Like, what are the priorities? What do you want to achieve here? Okay. And how do you plan
Mm,
that? And how do you put that into your schedule? So, from that perspective, I made a lot of mistakes, which I'm much better educated now. But I'm better for making those mistakes because I was forced to learn from it. So,
yeah. I love what you said. Like setbacks kind of leave clues,
mhm.
of what you should do. I mean, that is cool. And then don't miss the lessons.
Don't
You
miss the
know,
lessons.
you
Yeah,
know,
we often become so just
yeah,
emotionally attached to those
yep,
setbacks that we miss the lessons. But there's no, as Kobe says, there's no feelings. It's just learning, right? So
yeah. Can you explain or talk about how if you see an athlete, okay, that you're coaching now that doesn't see the clues, that is missing the lessons, how do you bring them out of that and so they can actually see it?
for me, it's really important that they understand there needs to be a certain level of self-awareness, and that is part of the program that I do with them, right? It's, you have focus, but you have awareness, and awareness is your ability to understand when you've lost focus, right? And now when you have that level of self-awareness, you can look at, you know, errors for what they are and be able to apply certain tools and techniques to overcome those errors quickly, so you can understand it from the perspective of a lesson as opposed to a shortcoming, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And so having that high level of awareness, identifying those errors, being able to apply certain tools to overcome them quickly, which is a trait of a high performing athlete. So you can take that lesson and move on quickly. And that takes time for a lot of athletes. For, the ability to overcome mistakes is from my experience, is one of the things that really hurts them from a mental performance standpoint. And it takes time to learn that skill.
yeah. I mean, I love what you said is you must have self-awareness of when you lost your focus,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's hard to do, you know? And I think a lot of athletes, excuse me, go into denial. I didn't lose focus. I'm as focused as I need to be. But you sit there as a coach, like, no, you're not. You're as
Yeah.
distracted as they come. You're not
Yeah.
focused.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. So from where you're sitting, you know, how have your personal your long-term goals, your ambitions, how much has your life changed since you left the game itself?
Yeah, since I left the game myself, as I said, I've gone on quite a journey, from going into coaching to going into to the business world, being able to apply a lot of my lessons from my sports journey into the business world, recognizing that myself and other athletes in the business world had a different advantage, than non-athletes. But ultimately, what's interesting is through that journey, and being in business, and as an athlete, as you said, you're always competitive. And so while I was in the business world, trying to educate myself on how to get ahead, and that's what kind of led me into really researching, high performers and people who are highly successful. And the big thing that clearly separated those people was their approach from a mental standpoint. And then when I realized that, I dived further in and then realized that this is exactly what I needed at the time that I didn't have it. And for me, that was, as I said, it was just a light bulb moment. Like everything
Yeah.
that I educated myself on kept bringing me back to the point of athletics. It's like, how can I use this to help athletes, right? Because you don't stop identifying as an athlete, even though we're not athletes anymore. You're always still in that mode for whatever reason. And so for me, it was like, wow, this can really help a lot of athletes. Like nobody talked to me about this. And so that journey of education ultimately through, although it was applied in the business world, led me back to athletics,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And now I'm using that to work with athletes. So it's been a journey, but I think, continuously staying engaged with athletes and continue to keep working in the world of sports just allows you to find different avenues where you can find a new purpose, if not
Yeah.
through playing, through other avenues. And you found it through this, where you're sharing a lot of great messages through your podcast. And for me, that's
Yeah.
working with athletes from a mindset standpoint.
Yeah. That is so cool. So I got to ask you this. You've done so many things. You've been a probably growing up a great player coming up into the through the school system. You go on, you play collegiately, professionally, right? And then you go on, you coach a team to almost the euphoria of a championship. You get real close. And you start your own business. You're coaching people. You're making impacts all over the place. Can you pinpoint one or two moments in your life that you're like, I am so proud of this or proud of that or excited about this?
Wow. We could be here all night if I
So I mean,
start
you got
talking.
so many things. How do you pinpoint one?
Yeah, no, that's a difficult thing. I think number one, one of the happiest moments was through my sports journey was finding out that I was drafted, and it was a
Mm,
surprise to me. In fact, it was my roommate who received a message from a friend of his, who said, "Hey, your teammate here got drafted," and he showed me it, and I was almost taken back. I'm like, "Is this real?" But that moment, as so many of us as young athletes, we have that ambition to reach the professional level, right? To,
yeah,
to to be able to say that you reached it, was a really special moment for me, and it just validated, all of the hard work and all of the sacrifices that you had put in up until till then. I don't think now I have a better understanding. You don't need that level of validation, but at that moment, it was really special for me. And now, in terms of what gets me excited, I love the excitement I get when I work with a new athlete. And every time I work with a new athlete and they tell me their goals, I don't think any differently than they're going to achieve their goals. And I get excited about the athletes that I work with, and I get super excited about them getting to the highest level and reaching their goals, and being able to see some of the athletes that I work with on TV. Like it's just, there's a huge sense of fulfillment in that, and it's almost reliving that experience when I was that age, right? And you almost get to
yeah,
relive it through all of the athletes, and
yeah.
so that's really exciting for me.
You're living vicariously through them, which is
Yes,
great. But
yes.
I got to ask you this. This is probably a silly question. You were drafted in the first round. How were you surprised?
Yeah, I honestly did not know. I had gone to some combines, but there was no feedback really. You just went to some of these combines after college,
Right.
hoping to make an impression. And I guess I did, but there was no feedback. You really just go to these combines and you compete and you go home. And when you're at that level, you realize how many talented athletes there are, right? It's like,
Yeah.
all of the things that used to separate you no longer separated you, right? Everyone
Right.
is fit, everyone can play, everyone is driven. So for me, I didn't realize that, I had made an impression. And so it was a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise for sure. But as that level, as you know, Jeff, as you continue to climb levels, that level of difference is so minimal,
Oh, it's
so
like a
minimal.
fraction. Yeah.
Fractions, it's details. And that's why, developing the mental skills is so important, right? Because those are the elements that can separate you
Right.
at that level, because everyone can play once you get to the top.
Right. And I hear so many people, I shouldn't say so many, when I talk to other, mental performance coaches, right? And I think most athletes in the athletic world and most coaches who coach the sport themselves, they talk about getting your body in shape. They spend 95 to maybe 97% of their time getting physically fit and ready to go. But they don't realize that the mind drives the body.
Yes.
But they spend such a small amount of time on it. Then they wonder why these kids get kind of mentally messed up and in a funk and in whatever, and they're not performing at the level they want. And like, oh, get in the gym more, run more, all this more. But it's really not that.
No, no. And to be fair to a lot of these coaches, they don't have that understanding in terms of how the mind works and how important mental performance is, and you can certainly appreciate this, Jeff. We've created this, especially at the youth level, we've created this overly competitive, high pressure environment where we expect these young athletes at such a young age to navigate through all those mental challenges,
Yeah.
but we don't give them any strategies to deal
Right.
with it. Right. And so we hear this all the time. It's like he or she is very talented, but they don't have it mentally. Right. It's like, no, they don't have it mentally yet. They need to work on those skills, and let's teach them those
Yes.
skills. And so how many talented athletes in our time got disregarded because they didn't have those mental skills, right? Now we're in a different situation, and we can intentionally train those particular skills, and so that those athletes don't get left behind, because many athletes are talented and they have the ambition and they have the passion. They just need help on the mental side.
Right. And the mental side's a hell of a lot harder than the physical side.
It is. It is. It's an ongoing battle, right?
Yeah.
And people talk about that, that you versus you, and it's really you versus your mind, and understanding how
Yeah.
that mind works and how the mind will hold you back if you don't understand it, and it will be
Right.
your worst enemy. Or right, there are strategies where you can take control of it and you can use it to be your best, your
Yeah.
secret weapon, right? But
Right.
that is a hard thing for young athletes to navigate through,
Yes.
and that's why I'm so passionate about helping them navigate through that and guiding them through that, because it is such a huge difference in terms of their approach towards a game and
Yeah.
beyond that, right? Because not all these athletes are going to go on to the next phase of their sport, but they all have to go on to the next phase of their life.
Right.
And we want them to have the right mental tools for that.
Right. And when it comes to the body turns off, which means you stop running, you sit in a chair, you watch TV, but your brain never turns off.
Never, never.
And maybe even when you're sleeping, you're dreaming, and sometimes your thought process is making you dream certain things. It's like it's always going, you know?
Yes, yes, and
So
and for many athletes, that means that they get into this state of overthinking
mm,
when they need to be able to shut it off, and that's such a difficult thing for them to navigate through, right? Because overthinking causes hesitation, which causes poor performance and a whole
ooh.
downward spiral from there.
So how do you help them do that?
Yeah, there's many tools and many techniques, and it's really understanding how the mind works, right? And why mindset is so important. And as you said, like the mind impacts the body, right? But the mind impacts the body through thoughts, and mindset is perspective. And when you have a certain perspective, those perspectives create certain thoughts. Those thoughts create certain emotions, and those emotions dictate how our body responds, right? And so that's why mindset is so important, because a lot of these athletes get into a state of stress and anxiety. And so that causes their body to freeze in important moments. And that all
Yeah.
started from thoughts, which came from their perspective, which is why mindset is so important.
God. I mean, we could sit here and talk about this for like 2 weeks,
Oh, I could go on all night. This is a great conversation. I
you
love
know?
talking about this.
And well, how can we, I shouldn't say we, how do you help athletes prepare mentally for when the game's over, go get a job? How do you help them there?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to when I'm talking to the athletes. It's don't attach yourself necessarily fully to the outcome, right? And it's about this process, and fall in love with this process, because who you're becoming in this process is going to set you up to be successful in all areas of your life, right? And so for me, it's who are you becoming, right? And it's this person who is has this high level of grit, who understands how to set goals, who understands how to manage their time. And what will that do for you in any of the endeavors that you have beyond there, right? And so it's sometimes detaching from the outcome and really falling in love with that process. And that process ultimately leads to the outcomes that you want, whether it's in sports or outside of sports.
So how do you teach an athlete? If I'll use me for an example of going back a gazillion years ago. I was a defensive back, and I'll never forget my college coach saying, no matter what happens, you can't get burnt deep. You just can't let these guys behind you. You can score everything up in front of you. We can fix that problem with everybody else in front of you. But if you're the last guy and the ball's thrown, you can't get burnt deep. And that's just like burnt into your head, right? And what do you think everybody's thinking about? Don't get burnt deep. So you're in the game and you're like, something happens and you get burnt deep.
Yeah.
How do you help these young men like forget that?
Yeah, that's an interesting take, because our minds are not made to understand it from that perspective, right? Whatever we focus on avoiding, okay, often ends up being the thing that ends up happening, right? Because our minds don't understand it from that perspective. It's like if I told you, Jeff, don't think of a giraffe, right? The first thing that's going to pop into your head is a giraffe, right? And so there's a big difference between focusing on what you want to avoid and focusing on the thing that you want to happen, right? Even though you want the same thing, right? It's about applying your mind to the right areas, right? So you really need to focus on the things that you want to happen and not on the things that you want to avoid. Because as you know, once you start focusing on that, it just increases that level of stress and anxiety and tension. And then ultimately that lowers your performance, right? And it's small little details,
Yeah.
even from a mental performance standpoint, that make a difference.
And that's so hard to do. And this is what this is a great conversation because the guys and the girls who sit on a couch and they watch the game on a TV and they sit there it's like, how does that happen? Why do you let that happen? How could you let that guy do that? Like, how do you not see that from the couch?
Yep.
And from when you're in the game in the moment and you're feeling the pain of the mistake or the you got beat or whatever, those poor kids are suffering heavily out there mentally. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and then they got to carry that when the game's over, and especially if they lose, into the locker room, onto the plane, into the bus, or into the party afterwards, or just to the next day.
Yeah.
Is there any advice you can give to the young kids on how to maybe recover from that?
Yeah, as I tell my athletes, you're not the first of all, we're humans, right? You're going to have mistakes, you're going to have failures, you're going to have setbacks. In fact, if you play a possession sport, the whole defensive strategy is to force you into mistakes because we're
Yeah,
humans, right? And so, as I tell the athletes, you are not defined by the mistakes or the setbacks or the failures. You are defined by how you react and bounce back from that. And that for me is far more important. Okay. You made a mistake. Great. I want to see your reaction to that. Okay. You had a huge setback. Great. I want to see your reaction to that. Okay. You had a failure. Great. I want to see your reaction to that. That doesn't define you. Okay. How you react does define you. And the other thing is, this is the opportunity to build that level of resilience that we've been talking about, right? We need to be resilient. You want to be successful in the world of sports, you need to be absolutely resilient. And the only opportunities you have to prove that you're resilient and build on that are these moments here, right? So we look at
yeah.
it from a different perspective. Okay. Here's a positive. We get to build on resilience. And secondly, I want to see your reaction to that, because that's more important than the moment.
But this stuff just like blows out of your mouth like nothing.
I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with athletes, and I said I've become so passionate about
Oh
this
my
because
God, it's
it,
obvious.
it's such a huge component in terms of athletic development, and it gets overlooked, and we just disregard this unless you're a high performance athlete and you start to have access to some of this information. But how about those talented athletes who without this information cannot get there, right?
Yeah.
And so we think I just look at how many top athletes were disregarded because they didn't have this level of coaching from that standpoint. And and that for me is become my mission, right? And
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing because my greatest regret is having not had the professional career that I wanted and having left so much on the table. But I've been able to use that disappointment as the fuel for this next chapter in my life, which is super cool.
Well, you're leading right into my next question. You know, if you were to go backwards in time, is there anything you would have done differently that would have helped prepare you for life after the game, or maybe things you would have just done differently in the game?
Yeah, I mean, certainly now that I now that I know this, obviously I would have focused on developing the mental side of the game. That would have made a huge difference. And at that moment, I really thought that maybe I had just hit my ceiling, and I didn't have enough to go beyond there. And as I look back now, it's no, I would have had a much more sustainable career if I had developed this side of the game. And so that for me would be the only change. But at the same time, I think you know life happens for us and not to us, right? And I think that was such an important part of my life because it had ultimately that disappointment me led me to this new journey and this new mission that I have. And so I think that pain point that I have just makes me so much more passionate about what I'm doing now. So
That's I love what you said. Life happens for us, not to us. You know,
absolutely,
that
perspective, mindset is perspective. It's all
that's it.
happening for us.
Yeah, my mindset is everything, and I love I don't know if you ever read John Gordon's books. You
I have
know,
not. It's on my list though.
okay, he's got a whole slew of books. I read them all, and he talks about like you don't have to do anything. You get to do it. And that's the way you got to look at it. I have to go to practice. No, you don't. You get to go to practice. I have to go to the weight
Absolutely.
room. No, you don't. You get to go to the weight room.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. And it's the same conversation with the athletes. So you told me you want to get to the next level, didn't you? So you get to go to training,
Yeah,
right? That's an opportunity for you to
right.
get towards your goal. So it's exactly that. So I'll have to read these books. They've been on my list, but
Oh, they're awesome.
I'll have to get to them quicker.
I got a whole library of stuff I could give you. So for how about for you? You're a young guy. You got so many years in front of you to accomplish so many things. What does your professional future and goals look like?
Yeah, great question. For me, only recently I would say that I've really fallen into this new purpose in my life. But I have a big goal for myself in terms of I want to be able to impact as many athletes as I can. I particularly enjoy working with young athletes, but not just young athletes. I work with high performance athletes at Division 1 level and beyond. But I just want to be able to impact as many athletes as I can from a mindset and a mental performance standpoint. Uh, just being able to have this impact on athletes, it's become my new addiction. As you said, athletics is a bit of a drug, but in a good
Yeah,
way. But when you see when you're talking to an athlete and you're able to break through and you can see that they're having their light bulb moment. I mean, that is just it's that new euphoric feeling
yeah,
for me that is hard to describe.
yeah.
And so I want to be able to do that on a large scale and understand how to do that, whether that's through podcasts like you, or whether that's through books, or whether that's through public speaking. And so I have this mission that I'm on now, and it's really personal to me, and that is my new goal, and it's exciting.
Have you written a book yet?
I have not written a book, but I'm a huge book guy. I read at least a book a week. If I'm in the
Do
car,
you?
I'm in
Wow.
audiobooks. I become obsessed with books. I'm a bit of a book nerd now.
Good, good. Me too. So have you thought about writing a book?
I have thought about writing a book, certainly. It's definitely something in my sights. And I mean, I'm a father. I have 4 young kids, and my oldest now is pushing me in the direction like you should write a book, and and you should get onto stages and talk. And so he's become
Yeah,
my biggest fan, and he's pushing me, and I love that, right? Because you want to, you know, you set the example, right? And kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. And I want to be able to show them that, hey, you
yeah,
you can go, and you can go, and you can go after your big goals, and you can achieve big things, and what you can do whatever you set your mind to.
yeah,
And so to be able to show them, here, there's more to life than
yeah,
than what meets the eye. So that's an exciting perspective for me, and it keeps me driven.
yeah.
So
So who's your ideal athlete to coach, right? And and how can people get a hold of you if they hear this, say, hey, I want to hire this guy. I want to bring this guy into my team, my school, my wherever. Who are those people that you can coach that your ideal coaching client will looks like, and how do they reach you?
Yeah, great question. And I think I need to do a little bit more work, but I've been fortunate that I've almost been in a place where there's too much demand for just myself. But most people find me on Instagram. So I'm there as Coach J or Jason A. Sousa. I
And
believe my handle.
that's how I found you on Instagram.
Yeah, and so most people have found me through that avenue. And in terms of the ideal athlete that I work with, the ones that I have the most success with, the ones that I can impact the most, are the ones who are very dedicated to their sport, and they want to get to the next level. They're very passionate, but they're just missing that piece from a mental standpoint, and they don't know how to navigate that on their own. And that's where it really come in. It's like, you have the drive, you have a lot of the physical traits, you're clearly talented, you could do the things in training, you struggle to do it when it matters most. Hey, those are just mental blocks. And that's where I step in and really help them uncover some of those mental blocks,
Yeah.
eliminate some of those limitations that they've created, whether those are through some of the belief systems or the fears that they have, and then really apply their mind towards their goals. And for anyone who has interest in that, or that falls in line with where they're at or where their child is at, they can certainly reach out to me on Instagram, and I will get back to them and see if there's a fit for that athlete and I to work together. That ability to connect with an athlete and from a personal standpoint, I think, is really what has led me to have success so far in this endeavor.
And what's really cool, Jay, about you is, sometimes there's coaches that are out there and they say, I'm going to coach you here, coach you there. And they've never really played to a certain level. And they're trying to coach these guys, these athletes to get to another level. You coach, I mean, you played the obviously the grammar school through the high school level
Mm.
at probably at a super elite level. Then you go onto the college and professional level, right? So there's nobody can say, well, you didn't do it. How do you know? You know what I mean? And that's what's so great about what you're doing. These athletes can't say, well, what do you know? You've never been there. Oh, you've been everywhere.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a big difference. Is I understand what's going on inside the mind of the athlete at whatever
Yeah.
stage they're at, and it's not just, hey, I learned this and this is theory. No, this is practice. I've been there, okay, and I know what you're thinking, and I know the challenges that you're dealing with, and I know how to overcome them. I didn't know how to overcome them at my time. I do now, and if I knew this information, it would have helped me. And so, being able to relate from that standpoint, I think, is a very powerful tool, and that's why I'm able to build that trust and also get into the head of the athlete. Because if you're a 16-year-old, I know exactly what it's like to be a 16-year-old obsessed with your sport, looking to get ahead. And so for that reason, it's very easy for me to relate to these
Yeah.
young athletes.
That's great. Well, Jay, I asked you a ton of questions. Appreciate all your time. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that you think we should touch on before we wrap it up?
The only thing you need to ask me, Jeff, is when we're going to do this again.
Well, you know what? That's a great question, because you know what I'm going to tell you is when I see that your own personal book on your shelf behind your head, that's when we're going to do it.
I
Uh,
love that. I love, now you set a goal for me. So I
all
will be
right.
back on this show if that's the goal.
Oh, without a doubt. I love to have you back, and time is everything, and the more time that goes by, the more things you achieve and the more things we get to talk about, but you should definitely put the pen to paper and put that everything that's in your mind into everybody else's hands to read.
Well, I appreciate the inspiration, and I will certainly make a dedication page to you in that book.
Oh, that would be awesome.